Hello, I'm your host, Shawn Aaron, and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices can be amplified as we share our transitional stories and many other issues that are relatable to trans men of color and our existence. This show is not only to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. In this episode, I'm going to answer a question that was emailed to me from Jay in New Jersey. So remember, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered on the show, or you would like for a future guest to answer, be sure to send your questions to hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. So the question is, why did you transition? That's a really, really good question. I transitioned later in life. So I started to transition in my early 30s. I always knew that I was a masculine person, but I grew up always knowing that I was a masculine centered woman and that I identified as lesbian. I came out to my mom as lesbian when I was 16 years old. So I always thought that was my journey. I never the only thing that I had a problem with physically was two things I had a problem with my body. The one thing was a period. I hated that shit. And the second thing was my titties. I hated that too. And I knew that I don't care if I had to lay them out on the table and cut them off myself. They was coming off, So those are like the two things that I knew for sure I wasn't okay with, but it didn't mean that I wasn't okay with who I was. I think it came much, much later. Maybe like right before I was 30, actually. I had never really been around anyone that was trans identified. So I didn't know, I hadn't, most folks that I hung around with were mostly lesbians and, and in the clubs or, my friends or whatever. So I never just really had someone that was trans identified that I can be like, oh, okay, this is the experience, or like, just to experience the person. So I didn't know what it was. It was kind of a mystery to me. So it wasn't something that I always thought that I wanted to do. But I remember I had an interaction with an individual. I was looking for a personal trainer. And so I linked up with this person that I found online, trying to find a personal trainer. So I had like these two pictures. I had like this little diary that I would keep all my food logs in and like my workout journal. And so inside that book, I had two pictures. There was one picture of two professional bodybuilders. One was male and one was female. And if you follow bodybuilding, and I've been following bodybuilding for a very long time, the woman was Iris Kyle. And then the guy is Kai Green, my two favorite bodybuilders. And I was like, I really want to look like Kai Green. In my mind, I was like, I want to look like Kai Green. But I was like, but I don't know how this personal trainer is going to perceive me. So I'm going to keep Iris Kyle in here. So I could, depending on how we interact, it's going to depend on, that's going to be which picture I show. So I got in there and I was actually too shy to show either picture. So I never show the picture. But I remember he looked inside of my book because he was trying to check out my food log and he saw these two pictures. He didn't say anything about it. He just looked and then, we went on about our day. But then like 3 or 4 sessions later, he asked me, he said, hey, I just want to ask you a personal question. I'm like, yo, what's up? What's going on? He was like, do you identify as trans? I was like, what? Why you ask me that? I was so confused. I'm like, why you ask me that? And actually I was really confused. I was like, I don't know. Am I? It's like, I don't know what you are. He was like, I don't know what you are. You know yourself. I was like, well, maybe I don't know myself. He was like, well, just to let you know, I'm trans identified. And I had no idea. And he was like, oh, well, yeah, that's the point. But anyway, I was like, wow. And I was so intrigued by this individual. I was so intrigued by him, not just because of his transness, but because of him as a person. So me and him actually became really good friends. We would ride our motorcycles together. We would go out to, we went to the Trans March in San Francisco together. So like we kind of hung out a bit. And I really got to see and learn him as a person. And I got very interested. And I was like, whoa, maybe this is the way I would like for my life to be. Maybe I don't want to identify as a lesbian or identify as a masculine of centered woman. Maybe, I would like to be a trans masculine man. So I thought about it for a very long time. I did, I was really confused in myself. I had to really learn myself. So I went and I had a conversation with my primary care physician, and my physician said, "Hey, I'm going to refer you to our gender specialists here at this hospital." There was like a specific clinic within the hospital that was just for gender related issues. So there were trans women, trans men, gender nonconforming folks, just anybody that wasn't a part of the gender binary, right? So I went there, and it was like, well, I think, you would get a little bit of experience if you went to some of these groups that we have. Okay. So I went to a group. Maybe like once or twice a week. And I did that for, probably about a year and a half. And, it's just group talk, people talking about their experiences, talking about their surgeries, talking about starting T, talking about starting all, any hot type of hormone. And we just discussed life and how we felt about life and how it was to be authentic and to live and be yourself. And I started to really question myself, and I really started to, gravitate towards who I wanted to be. And so at the time I was married. So I went home and I talked to my wife at the time, and I said, I'm thinking about, transitioning. And she was very supportive, very loving about the whole decision. But then the scary part for me was I needed to tell my son. Yes, I have a son. My son is 25 years old now. But at the time, I think he was probably about 12 or 13, if I can remember correctly. And I was just so scared. I'm like, but he called me dad already. To him, I was already dad, but I was like, I don't know how to communicate this. And so I went to him one day and I said, son, I'm going to transition. He was like, well, what's that? And so I explained to him, what transition it meant and what it meant for me. And in verbatim, he said, let's do it. And I was like, whoa, like that for a child to say that. I'm like, well, for one, we raised him right. Right. But then I was just so happy. Like, if I got my family's blessing, let's do it. But I just was really able to step into myself. The next question that was asked, Jay from New Jersey, was, how did you transition and what steps did you take? So what I did was, after the group, I ended up getting recommendation from my primary care physician to see a therapist. So here in this state, in the hospital that I was going to at the time, it may have changed because this was also in 2013. But I had to see a therapist. And that was just one of the requirements, right? Because you have to have a therapist letter and all of this stuff. So I ended up not just talking about gender issues, but just like really working through a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of other issues that I was dealing with, depression and all of this stuff. And so after that, I remember the therapist was like, I think you're ready. I think I'm ready. Okay. So she sent me back to my primary care physician. And from there, I was able to start T. So this is 2013. I started taking T in it was February 11th, 2013. And so I was still, even after starting T, because they want you to still go to groups. So then you can talk through, starting T and what's happening while you're doing T. So I was still going to my groups, still going to my individual therapy sessions. But then I was able to schedule my appointment for top surgery. And while I was doing this, so then I had top surgery October 1st, 2013. And so after that, I ended up legally changing my name the same year. So I changed my name December 31st, 2013. So it moved rather quickly. I did change my name, but I didn't change my F to an M on my license till actually only about 4 years ago. So we're in 2022. I probably changed it. Maybe I'm getting my math wrong, but I think I changed it in about 2017, 2018. So it's not that long ago. So I held on to that F for a long time. Not because I didn't want to get rid of it, but I just felt like, who knew? Like, who's gonna look at my license? Nobody gonna see my license, right? So yeah, so that's my transition story. So if you have a question that you would like to hear be answered on the show, or there's a question that you would like one of the future guests to answer, be sure to send your questions to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. Hello@dembois.org. And you may hear your question answered on the show. Till next time, take care. Thank you for listening to today's show. Once again, I'm your host. My name is Shawn Aaron. Be sure to like, be sure to share this show out with folks in your networks. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. You can also visit our website at dembois.org. That's DEMBOIS.org. If you think you would make a great guest on this show, or maybe you have a question for myself or a future guest that you would like to hear answered on the show, please send an email to hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO@dembois.org. Until next time, take care.